the General Assembly for 2018 rumbling into Richmond. It's supposed to convene on January the 10th. Now, there's a farewell gala at the mansion for Governor McAuliffe. This is before the inauguration gala on Saturday night, whatever that date is. That would be the, 13th for Ralph Northam. But the farewell Terry McAuliffe gala on Wednesday night, January 10th, I believe, if memory serves me correct. And the Fräulein and I have been invited to that big dinner there. We're going, obviously, big supporters of Governor McAuliffe. And so we get to go to the governor and first lady's farewell gala dinner at the mansion. Second time we've been there. We were there in December earlier. We want to thank the governor for that. We had a great time with him. And so we get to go back at their gala, very exclusive. So I must be on the preferred list. My wife and I are going. No question. I wouldn't miss that for the world. It's going to be a lot of fun. He's been a great governor. I know you Republicans out there are going to get mad. Terry McAuliffe has been a great governor of Virginia. Jobs are up. Employment is up. He's worked his tail off. There's no scandals. There's no major issues. He had one problem with the economic fund where they gave a check for $1 million or somebody to some company that they didn't do the proper vetting and they ran off with the money, a Chinese company. That was bad. But they've done a lot of stuff over a 4-year period. That's the only blemish that they've had. They've no crazy things he's signed. They've kept Virginia stable. They've kept their bond rating stable. He's been a great governor. And he's vetoed some of the crazy stuff the Republicans put in on the social agenda. Things that I said they would never even have gotten out of committee if the Republicans weren't confident he was going to veto it, because they didn't want half that stuff to pass anyway, the bathroom bill and all that crap. So he's been a great governor. I think his legacy in Virginia will live on. Now, what happens now? Well, let's get Ben Tribbett to figure this out, one of the leading consultants for the Democrats in America, Ben Tribbett, and you can follow Ben on Twitter at @NotLarrySabato. Hey, Ben, good to have you. Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year to you, John.
Now, all this going on, the Shelley Simons, David Yancey, District 94 still hanging in the balance. Now there's going to be the drawing tomorrow at 11 a.m. But even if the Republicans lose, they're going to ask for a recount, which isn't going to get completed in a week, which means that they'll get their speaker in anyway, right? How's this work?
That's right. I mean, so the Democrats actually asked the state board to delay the drawing, and that seems to have ended up being the final of a series of strategic errors on their part,
right,
that have led to what could have been a 50-50 House, and we're going to have a random drawing to determine whether it's 50-50, still having complete Republican control of the speakership, committees, committee chairman, because the Democrats won't have those votes on opening day. And when they asked for that drawing to be delayed while they challenged in court, essentially what that meant was exactly what you described, John, that after the drawing is complete, there's still more process to go, and you won't have a delegate seated in time for opening day. So all the eggs now for the Democrats are in this reconsideration by the judges that they've sent to them, requesting a reconsideration. Some people, and I would say some very smart people who are legal minds, don't even think the court exists anymore to reconsider. You know, in Virginia, we don't have 3-judge panels that sit around to hear cases. This was a special 3-judge panel that was put together for the recount that ended when the recount was complete. So in Virginia law, you cannot appeal a recount. So what the Democrats did instead is they asked these judges to reconsider their decision. And so most people don't even believe that the judges still exist as a court or a special panel to reconsider the decision. So it's mind-boggling, to be frank.
Okay, so that everybody understands, had the Democrats not challenged this, basically, they would have had the time, if the drawing was a week ago, where it should have been, and, well, if the Republican won, that would have been it. The Republicans would have had control. But if Shelley Simons had won the drawing, then David Yancey's people would have asked for a recount immediately. That would have been done and over and completed by the time January 10th came, and it would be a tie, and you would have to share power. But because they delayed the drawing, now they're in a lose-lose. If they win, they lose. If they lose, they lose. Because if they win, David will call for a recount, which is within his right. That isn't going to be decided by the 10th. And then the Republican seat, they'll name Kirk Cox Speaker with a 50 to 49 majority because the other seat's open, right? And then he'll name all the committee members, and then they get beat anyway. So it's crazy.
No, it really is crazy. And I will say this too, John. I think that, the Democrats have obviously been out of power for a long time in the House of Delegates. They've been irrelevant. This election has given them numbers to become relevant. I'm not going to say they've regained relevancy until session starts because we need to see if the leadership knows how to use these numbers. So far, they haven't indicated that they do. But I think that what has gone into, this situation more than anything is that when you play hardball politics, the other side will play hardball politics also. And I think that the Democrats assumed at the start of this process that the Republicans were going to play very, very hardball politics and control the House. And I'm not sure that this started out in that case because I think the Republicans were chastised by the election results. I think they were looking for a way to sort of save some face after the election and figure out what to do. And in that window, the Democrats kept coming in and making legal challenges they knew wouldn't succeed, asking for recounts that they knew would not overturn the results, otherwise behaving in a way that suggested that they were, going to try to seize control in the 50-50 House themselves. And so once they did that, I think it's logical that the Republicans would come back and pull this maneuver to take control. And frankly, I would be loudly complaining about it as a Democrat if the Democrats hadn't been doing the exact same thing for the last 5 weeks, and this wasn't the first Republican response. Remember that the first press release that came out after Shelley Simons won by one vote was the House Republican caucus congratulating her and offering to share power with the Democrats.
Right.
So this was not a week ago. This was not a foregone conclusion that this was going to happen in this way. But I think as the Democrats have frankly, I have to tell you, John, I'm not happy with the way that the Democratic caucus has talked about these judges either that are involved in this recount. Judge Sugg, who is the chief judge in Newport News, and it was the head of the recount because of that. He's been portrayed as being a Republican that was in this for Yancey. Judge Sugg has a donation history on VPAP that people can go look up prior to becoming a judge. It's 100% for Democrats, okay? And Judge Sugg's father was a very prominent judge in Southside, one of the first African-Americans ever to be a judge in Southside. And Judge Sugg, obviously also African-American, was supported by the entire legislative Black caucus in Hampton Roads, which is all Democrats. So this whole thing of Judge Sugg was trying to throw the election to David Yancey. I understand that people may not like the interpretation of that individual ballot, but that is the way to interpret that ballot under state law. And I just think the way that the Democrats have behaved here and spreading this kind of rumors have been really trashy, and it's been a bad way to get started.
I think you're onto something here, Ben, because I do remember the first press release that the Republican caucus sent out when Shelley Simons in the recount was declared the winner by one. They didn't whine. They did. They offered her. I remember reading it and saying, wow, this is pretty interesting. They didn't fight it. They didn't say there was going to be a recount. They said, congratulations on the win. We look forward to coming to an arrangement to share committee assignments, etc. And I'm like, wow, that's odd. I mean, I expected them to be, firing missiles. They didn't. But then the Democrats did. Now, here's my question. Let's go to who is running the House caucus for the Dems. Is it Toscano? Who is it?
It's a great question, John. So Toscano is still the leader. Ken Plum is running against Toscano to be the Democrats' what we would call speaker designee. which is the person you put forward in a 50-50 House to be Speaker. The problem is there won't be a 50-50 House for a Speaker designee for the Democrats. Now, Ken Plum has told people privately that he's not interested in being the minority leader, that he would only be interested in being Speaker, which has put us in a quandary because Ken Plum is going to beat David Toscano if they have a head-to-head contest in the caucus. Actually, when Toscano, we talked about this last week, when they had the delay of the vote a few weeks ago, Toscano was so upset with the way it was going that he stormed out of the meeting. I mean, it was just, infantile politics at its best. I don't know how the caucus moves forward now because the Republicans are going to take control. It seems like in virtue of taking control that Ken Plum is going to lose his interest in leadership because he doesn't want to be the minority leader. I'm not sure that Ken even wants to be the floor leader in a 50-50 House. He wants to be the Speaker or at least the Speaker designee. That's not going to happen. And David Toscano does not have the confidence of a majority of his caucus, yet I'm not sure there's anyone else who's stepping forward to challenge him. So the Democrats are in a real precarious knows that David doesn't really speak for the Democrats, yet he very well may remain as the leader.
Unbelievable. So he may be the leader, continue to be the minority. Look, they're going to be in the minority because they screwed this up. I mean, they gambled, it lost, it didn't make any sense because they went from having a 50-50 shot to power share to a lose-lose scenario. I can't even imagine how bad the strategy is. So let's get to Toscano now. He could stay as a minority leader simply because nobody else will challenge him. But don't you think somebody will step up?
This is not a position that the talent in the caucus has ever gravitated to.
Right.
In fact, you look at Toscano's leadership team, and, whether it's Rip Sullivan, Alfonso Lopez, the caucus chair, Charnel Herring, these are not our biggest talents in the Democratic caucus. And that's just the reality. So how does this work going forward? You're going to have a weak leader. In his weak leadership, I think you're going to continue to see weird things come out, such as, he sent out an email last week telling the new Democratic delegates they needed to be on the floor on opening day, and if they needed child care, to get child care. John, most parents that I've dealt with don't need a reminder from David Toscano that they need child care. And this kind of bizarre stuff, is so insulting. He talks down to these members. It's really just, it's mind-numbing, the stuff that he does. And I just think the Democrats are going to get completely run over here unless the governor intervenes and really starts to negotiate on behalf of the House Democrats. I think they've got to go around David Toscano, and this has got to become a Kirk Cox and Ralph Northam at the table situation,
right?
Or at least their teams, because the Democrats are just getting completely mangled here, and that's not what the voters intended. The voters intended to give the Democrats some power and leverage in this election. That's what happened.
I would agree with that.
And the Democrats are mangling it badly.
I would agree with that. But, what you're saying, Ben, here on the air is pretty bold. You're basically asking for the governor-elect Ralph Northam, basically to do an end run around the entire Democratic House caucus and seek a deal with Kirk Cox and Republican leadership. I mean, that's a pretty
I would say run
bold
around
statement.
The leadership, not run around the caucus, because I think that the Democratic House caucus, which, by the way, now, John, is almost half freshmen, are actually looking for leadership. They're looking for someone to show them what to do, and leaving in an ineffective leader who doesn't have the support of a majority of his caucus just because no one else wants the job is a recipe for disaster for Ralph Northam.
You mentioned that the Toscano's leadership team doesn't represent the top talent within the Democratic House caucus, and you named three names, Rip Sullivan, Chanel Herring, and Alfonso. Give me three names that you, in your mind, would say do represent the new leadership top talent of the Democrats.
Sure. Well, I'll just throw out a few names. First of all, I'll start in your area, John. I have very, very high hopes for the new freshman delegate from Norfolk, Jay Jones. His father was one of the really the great legislators of our time before he became a judge. You remember that his father, Gerald, actually lost the primary for lieutenant governor to Tim Kaine in 2001.
Right.
And I think Jay, having grown up in politics, is going to come in, and he's not going to be your normal freshman. I think he actually is at a cut above the other freshmen. So I have a lot of hope for him. You look at Northern Virginia, and we have people like, whether it's Jennifer Boysko, who's now in her second term, Patrick Hope from Arlington, whether it's Paul Krizak from Mount Vernon, Eileen Fillercorn from the Burke area. We have talent up here. And I'm not going to suggest a particular name. I'll just also say from the Richmond area, I have very, very high hopes for all three of the new Democratic freshman delegates from the Richmond area. They all seem like none of them were expected to win, although I had predicted that Skylar would pull an upset on your show. But Deborah Rodman, no one had expected her to win. From what I've seen so far, these are really sharp individuals that are going to learn quickly and could be big assets to the Democrats going forward. And I'll say this, John, I think there may be more talent in the freshman class than there is in the rest of the House Democratic caucus combined.
Why wouldn't Patrick Hope run for minority leader and challenge Descano? I mean, the guy ran a very vigorous race for the nomination for Congress in 2014. Why wouldn't he step up?
I mean, you should invite him on and ask him, John. But I think the if I was going to guess, I would say, look, Patrick passes a greater percentage of his bills in a Republican House than almost any other member of that caucus, and I think he takes on a really serious role of having to enact the legislation that places like Arlington need and be able to get it through the Republican House. And so I think that's the role that he feels like he fulfills. Patrick also takes a big leadership on healthcare issues. I expect that you'll see in this General Assembly, with the House more evenly divided, that people will look to him when we're talking about Medicaid expansion. He's obviously a healthcare attorney, but in terms of being the House leader, I've never heard him express an interest. All
right, I got to take off. Ben, we got to have you back on tomorrow because we got to talk about this Justin Fairfax chief of staff debacle. That has really pissed me off. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. I want to thank Ben for being with us. Ben Tribbett, you can follow him at Not Larry Sabato. Ben, we'll have you back.